Thank you for joining us for Family Talk with Dr. Jean Clinton from McMaster University. I'm Deb DeYoung. In our last video, Dr. Clinton spoke with us about the development of the teenage brain. Now we're going to focus on relationships, what they mean to our kids, and how we can do better at them. In a speech you gave to the YMCA recently, you said relationships are nutrition that feeds the brain. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. Well, what we now understand is that the brain is a social organ. That if we did not have the intense relationships, certainly early in life, then babies would die. And what we're learning more and more is that relationships are the substance and nutrition that help young people, we're talking about the teens, engage, learn about the world. And it's the sense of belonging, the sense of being respected and not being dissed, that has a huge impact on how the neurons, the brain cells, how they're going to be connecting up and talking to each other. So the key concept is that what the brain is busy doing is what brain is being refined. So the experiences are changing it. And relationships, particularly in the teen years, are so much of the formula getting poured in that create what connections are going to be strong, kept going, which ones are going to be snipped away.
So how do we make sure our children get enough of the relationship food from parents and not just peers during the times when they're pushing us away?
Yeah, well, Deb, again, it's such a dilemma, and parents feel that the peers are much more important than they are. And in some ways it's true that if we did not have adolescents from the cave ages seeking out the partners and affiliation and all of that, we would not be here as a species. So there's a big biological drive to be with your peers. Remember, the brain is a social organ. But what we translate that as sometimes as parents is that they don't love us anymore, or we're not as important anymore. We are hugely important. The drive to affiliate, remember that limbic, that emotional brain, is a stronger drive at that point, but it doesn't mean they love us less. It means they need to be with their peers and they still need the relationship with their parent. Now it may be a couple of years later that they say, oh yeah, you know, suddenly my parents got wise, you know, I thought they were dumb all that time. So it means that we have to hang in as parents. We never give up. We never give up. We always realize, okay, this is for a good reason. I'm here no matter what. I'm here no matter what. So that relationship is the glue that brings it all together.
So let's talk about what you call the communication gap in the developing brain. Can you explain what it is and what it means?
So one of the key concepts, again, has been understood, and this is some of the work of Dr. Jurgel and Todd. When you and I look at each other and I have a facial expression, as adults, we're likely going to be reading the same emotion. She did some experiments and showed kids faces, and what she found was they were reading, she saw a face that we would say was fear, and a whole lot of the kids said she looks angry. The face that they would see. And so she did some more investigation into that, and what she found was that kids are reading more negative, more of these hot emotions in face than we as adults are, and that in fact they are processing that emotional face through their limbic system, through a little organ called the amygdala, which is our fight or flight. So they're seeing more emotion in our face than we know we're emitting. So that means, you know, parents hear all the time, why are you yelling? The parents say, I'm not yelling. You want to hear yelling? But the kids are reading more emotion. So that can lead to a very big communication gap.
So with the communication gap in mind, what advice do you have for parents when communicating with their kids?
Very simple. Listen more than you talk. We have 2 ears, 1 mouth. My First Nations colleague tell me that that is something that they learn from very early on. Listen twice as much as you talk. But, you know, I'm a mum, you know, progress, not perfection. And that's hard to do because what we want as parents is we want to make sure they're doing the right thing and they're turning out okay. And we don't listen nearly enough. And we're telling our kids what to do instead of saying, oh, God, that's a really tough spot you were in. Tell me. right? Tell me. But man, oh man, we're too busy. Yeah, 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 yeah. So best advice, 2 ears, 1 mouth. So listen twice as much as you talk.
So let's talk teenagers and their friends. Can you tell us how the teen brain processes are different when they're alone versus with peers? And what does this mean for parents with a teen heading out to a party?
Wow. I wish this were not the case. But the reality is that when you're with your peers, the risk-taking goes up. I wish it wasn't the case, but science is very solid on this. They can have kids do a test, you know, on one of the computers, and they make good, solid choices. Then peer influence comes in, and risk-taking goes up. So it's a real worry. And, you know, there may be very, very good anthropological, you know, back in the day reason for this, but the reality is that emotional brain gets more aroused and alert with your peers, means that that prefrontal cortex, that thinking, you know, the executive director, is less accessible. So what can we do? Well, one is we can have our kids know that. You know, the first time my son got picked up by one of his friends who had just got his license, I said, do not talk to him, do not turn on the radio, and no one else is coming in the car, right? So did that actually happen? No. But I think if we as parents can say, listen, I'm not trying to be a party pooper, I want to keep you safe, and you need to know this. So I'm not sure we can do much more than tell them that. But the other thing is we always make ourselves available. That whether we've got a code, you know, that if you're in trouble and you want out of there, you call me. And it's even, you know, just call and say, hey, Ma, I saw this cool canoe, you know. And canoe is the word, no questions asked. Zoot, I'm coming and bringing you out of there. Because you're now feeling all the tension and pressure up, but you don't know why.
So aren't some relationships, maybe a teen's relationship with a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or certain peers, toxic instead of nutritional? And what's the impact of toxic relationships on children's brains in the long term?
Wow, that's a big, big question. So one, all of us can have toxic relationships, right? All of us can have relationships, you know, energy vampire, you know, you just feel everything being sucked out of you. So all of us can. This is not something peculiar to teens, right? So first of all. The other is being in love is not really, well, there are those scientists, Helen Fisher, for example, would say that's not an emotion, it's an addiction, right? That there are areas of the brain when you're in love that's reward rich, and it is more like an addiction. So you have to treat it more like an addiction than an emotion. So you never tell a kid, what's the big deal? You know, she wasn't that great anyway, right? So that's just one piece of it. But for sure, a toxic relationship, in the teen years, the brain is changing. The experiences are literally building the networks. So if your first and second experiences with love and emotion is one that's abusive, or harsh, that certainly is going to have a bigger impact on you than when you're 30, than when you're 13, because the brain is so changeable. Unfortunately, we don't get to select who it is that our children have that with, but the key message for parents is never belittle or diminish the impact, the hugeness of that feeling. It's, man, that sucks. Oh, wow, what can we do to help you get your mind off of this? Rather than get up, get out, what's the big deal? That was 6 months ago, right? So it's very important that the support, we can't control who they pick, really, but we can choose how we support kids after.
So then, other than relationships with family members, what can we do to help our kids choose the right relationships, or at least discourage harmful ones without it backfiring?
Yeah. Without it backfiring is the thing, because you know that, say, don't hang out with them is just like a, ooh, I dare you to hang out with them. Again, I think it comes back to respectful dialogue and respectful relationships. Kids do tend to hang out with people who are like themselves, right? It is that there are some fringe. The majority of kids, however, are not on the fringes. So the majority of parents don't need to worry. It is the type of person that they have been raised to be, the type of respectful relations they have at home that has a lot to do with the friends that they pick. So that's first. That's an absolutely key message. And also what's effective if your kid is hanging out with the wrong crowd is not to say you can't go, not to say you're grounded, not to do this, because remember, this emotional brain is under construction. It doesn't have access to the wisdom through the prefrontal cortex to say, good decision, Mum. They're driven by that. So it's to say, oh man, gee, you know, you really like that guy, but he keeps getting in trouble. What's up? Like, what do you think's going on? Wow. So like, are you at risk when you're with him? You are. Boy, that worries me. Do you see what? So that very, very different kind of engagement. So connect before you start thinking about control.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Clinton. Well, it's not always easy to manage our relationships with teens. Dr. Clinton, thank you for giving us so much insight into how we can do a better job as parents. Next up will be our video on the impact of stress on our kids. Tune in and learn how this generation is different.